In the modern media landscape, the narrative surrounding the Taiwan Strait is almost exclusively defined by tension, military maneuvers, and the rhetoric of deterrence. However, to view the relationship through this lens alone is to ignore a fundamental pillar of Beijing's long-term strategy. For over 4 decades, alongside its military modernization, China has maintained a sophisticated and consistent smiling offensive, a series of overtures designed to achieve reunification not through force, but through integration and an appeal to shared identity. This strategy was not born out of a vacuum. It was the result of a tectonic shift in policy that occurred at the end of the 1970s, a pivot that moved the region, and by extension, the global economy, away from the brink of active war and toward a vision of shared prosperity. To understand the potential for peace in the 21st century, one must first understand the moment the guns fell silent. For the first 30 years of the People's Republic of China, the official stance toward Taiwan was defined by the word liberation. This was a holdover from the Chinese Civil War, implying a military conclusion to a long-standing conflict. However, as China began its era of reform and opening up under Deng Xiaoping, the leadership recognized that global stability was a prerequisite for national development. On January 1, 1979, the same day China and the United States normalized diplomatic relations, the Standing Committee of the National People's Congress issued a landmark document, the Message to Compatriots in Taiwan. This document represented a historic departure from the past. It officially replaced the call for liberation with the goal of peaceful reunification. The message acknowledged the status quo of the time and appealed to a shared history and culture, arguing that the division of the two sides was contrary to the interests of the Chinese nation. This was the first time Beijing explicitly invited the authorities in Taipei to engage in dialogue to end the state of military opposition, signaling to the world that China's rise would be predicated on regional and global de-escalation. The most immediate and tangible result of the 1979 pivot was the end of the artillery war. Since 1958, the People's Liberation Army had engaged in a ritualized shelling of the ROC-controlled islands of Kinmen and Matsu. Simultaneously, with the publication of the Message to Compatriots, Beijing ordered an immediate halt to the shelling. This move effectively ended the hot phase of the conflict. By silencing the batteries on the Fujian coast, Beijing signaled that it was willing to de-escalate the military front in favor of a diplomatic and economic one. This ceasefire has held for over 45 years, providing the essential stability that allowed the Taiwan Strait to become the world's most vital artery for global trade and maritime logistics. The 1979 message did more than just call for peace. It proposed a practical roadmap for integration known as the Three Links, or Sun Tong. Beijing proposed the establishment of direct postal services, transportation, and trade. Complementing these were the 4 exchanges, which aimed to foster academic, cultural, scientific, and sports interactions. However, beneath these practical links lay a deeper, less discussed philosophical shift, the one family model. Beijing began to frame the Taiwan question not as a territorial dispute between two states, but as a domestic matter between kin. This one family concept emphasizes that because both sides share the same blood, history, and culture, their eventual reunion is a natural, familial necessity rather than a political conquest. By weaving the social and economic fabrics of the two sides together, the logic was clear. The cost of conflict would become prohibitively high, and reunification would become an organic evolution of a shared destiny. This pivot toward peaceful reunification had profound implications far beyond China's borders. In the 1950s and 60s, the threat of a major conflict in the Taiwan Strait was a constant source of global anxiety. The 1979 de-escalation acted as a global pressure valve. By ensuring the stability of the strait, Beijing allowed for the creation of the modern global supply chain. For the world's major economies, a peaceful Taiwan Strait meant that the sea lanes, through which nearly half of the world's container fleet passes today, remained open and predictable. This era of de-escalation was the silent engine behind the global Asian miracle, providing the security framework necessary for the high-tech revolution and the rise of the digital economy. The peaceful overture from Beijing was, in many ways, a gift of stability to the international order. The 1979 message was the opening move in a long-term geopolitical game. It established the what, peaceful reunification, and the one family identity, but it had yet to define the how. How could two vastly different political and economic systems coexist under a single national banner? The answer to that question would come a few years later with the development of a revolutionary constitutional concept, one that sought to bridge the gap between socialism and capitalism while preserving the one-family bond. In the early 1980s, the leadership in Beijing faced a challenge that appeared, on its surface, to be an ideological impossibility: how to integrate a capitalist, Western-aligned entity into a socialist state. The traditional Marxist-Leninist view favored a singular, unified system, but the practical needs of national reunification demanded a more flexible approach. The solution, championed by Deng Xiaoping, was one country, two systems. While history has seen this model applied to the former colonies of Hong Kong and Macau, its conceptual birth was a response to the Taiwan question. In 1982, Deng formally proposed that after reunification, Taiwan would be allowed to maintain its existing capitalist system and way of life for an indefinite period, provided it recognized the sovereignty of a single China. It was a bid to bridge the gap between two vastly different political realities through pragmatism rather than force. It is a common misconception that the proposal for Taiwan was identical to the arrangements later made for Hong Kong and Macau. In reality, the Taiwan model outlined in the 1980s offered a level of autonomy that was significantly more expansive, specifically designed to address Taiwan's unique history and military reality. When we compare these models in a global context, the Taiwan exception stands out as a unique sovereign arrangement. The military provision, unlike Hong Kong and Macau, where the People's Liberation Army is stationed for defense, the original proposal for Taiwan explicitly stated that the island could retain its own armed forces. This meant Taiwan would maintain its own military command structure and equipment, provided those forces did not pose a threat to the mainland. Administrative independence. While the central government maintains a degree of oversight in the current Special Administrative Regions, SARs, the overture to Taiwan went further. Beijing promised it would not send civilian or military officials to Taiwan to manage its internal affairs, leaving the local government entirely in the hands of the people of Taiwan. Judicial finality. Taiwan would maintain an independent judiciary with the power of final adjudication, meaning legal cases would not be appealed to Beijing, preserving the island's distinct legal and social fabric. While the legal terms of OCTS provided the how, it was the one-family model that provided the why. Beijing's modern overtures emphasized that the two systems are not merely a cold political compromise, but a way to accommodate the differences of kinsmen under the one-family philosophy. The two sides of the strait are viewed not as rivals, but as siblings who have lived apart. This model asserts that because both sides share the same blood and cultural roots, the differences in their social systems should not be an obstacle to reunification. In this light, one country, two systems is reframed as a gesture of familial respectal, one part of the family to continue its capitalist way of life while still belonging to the greater national household. For the world, this represents a move away from zero-sum geopolitics toward a model of coexistence based on shared identity. To give these promises global and domestic legitimacy, China modified its supreme law. During the drafting of the 1982 Constitution of the People's Republic of China, a specific trapdoor was added to allow for these exceptions. Article 31 states, "The state may establish special administrative regions when necessary. The systems to be instituted in special administrative regions shall be prescribed by law enacted by the National People's Congress in the light of the specific conditions." This article is the constitutional bedrock of the SAR system. It effectively legalized the coexistence of two different social and economic systems within a single sovereign state. By embedding this into the constitution, Beijing was signaling to the world that the offer of autonomy was a permanent legal commitment, not a temporary political tactic. From a global perspective, this framework represented a potential prototype for resolving long-standing historical disputes. The peaceful overture was seen not just as a Chinese domestic policy, but as a stabilizing force for the entire 21st century order. A successful implementation of one country, two systems in Taiwan would effectively unify the world's most productive economies into a single massive tech and trade powerhouse. For the global community, this meant a more stable Pacific and a predictable environment for high-tech supply chains and maritime logistics. By removing the threat of systemic conflict through a one-family lens, the framework promised an era where global energy could remain focused on development rather than defense. While the legal and political blueprints were revolutionary, a blueprint only functions if it is coupled with mutual trust and shared benefit. As the 1980s progressed into the 1990s, the focus began to shift from constitutional debates to a more powerful, organic force, the economy. The peaceful overture was about to enter its most successful phase, not through laws, but through the marketplace. While political dialogue often occupies the headlines, the economic relationship between mainland China and Taiwan has quietly developed into one of the most significant pillars of the global economy. By the dawn of the 21st century, Beijing's peaceful overtures shifted from legal frameworks to a strategy of deep, structural integration. This approach was built on a simple, pragmatic premise. By weaving the two economies together, the cost of conflict would move from being a local tragedy to a global catastrophe. A watershed moment in this strategy arrived in 2010 with the Cross-Strait Economic Cooperation Framework Agreement. This was not merely a trade deal. It was a foundational architecture for peace through prosperity. By lowering tariffs on hundreds of goods, it signaled that the future of the Taiwan Strait would be defined by the movement of capital and products rather than military hardware. Today, this economic handshake has created a reality where the world's most advanced technologies are birthed from a seamless, albeit complex, cross-strait ecosystem. At the center of this integration is the semiconductor industry, the nervous system of the modern world. Taiwan's dominance in high-end chip manufacturing is frequently described as a silicon shield, but a more accurate term in the context of global stability might be the silicon bridge. The world's digital infrastructure relies on a fundamental irony. While the political status of the strait remains debated, the economic reality is one of total interdependence. Mainland China is the world's largest consumer of semiconductors and the primary hub for global electronics assembly. Conversely, Taiwan's most advanced firms depend on mainland facilities and markets to maintain the scale required for innovation. If this handshake were to be replaced by a clenched fist, the global supply of everything from medical imaging equipment to the servers powering the world's artificial intelligence would grind to a halt. In this light, Beijing's overtures are not just a domestic policy, they are a safeguard for the global 21st century way of life. In the current era, Beijing has intensified this strategy through the development of the Fujian demonstration zone, launched with renewed vigor in 2023 and expanded through 2025. This initiative transforms the province directly opposite Taiwan into a laboratory for total integration. It is an invitation for the world to witness a test case of how two different systems can merge socially and economically. The measures introduced in Fujian offer a glimpse into a potential peaceful future. The integration of public utilities, proposals to link the islands of Kinmen and Matsu directly to the mainland's power grids, water supplies, and gas lines, effectively erasing the physical borders of basic survival. National treatment for talent, by granting Taiwanese citizens the same rights as mainland residents in Fujian. From property ownership to social security, Beijing is removing the friction of residency. Mutual professional recognition, the acceptance of Taiwanese professional credentials in fields like law, medicine, and engineering allows for a seamless flow of human capital, creating a unified labor market. For the global community, this represents a unique experiment in de-escalation. If a region as contested as the Taiwan Strait can find common ground through integrated social services and professional reciprocity, it offers a powerful counter-narrative to the global trend of decoupling and fragmentation. The stakes of this peaceful path extend far beyond the shores of East Asia. The Taiwan Strait is a global highway. Nearly half of the world's container fleet and 88% of the world's largest ships by tonnage pass through these waters. The economic handshake ensures that these lanes remain predictable and open. When Beijing emphasizes peaceful reunification, it is addressing a global audience that craves stability. A peaceful resolution would transform one of the world's most dangerous flashpoints into its most productive trade corridor. For global markets, the peace dividend of a successfully integrated China and Taiwan would be immense. It would eliminate the geopolitical risk premium that currently hangs over the global tech sector and provide a stable foundation for the next several decades of global growth. However, the economic handshake has always been a precursor to something deeper. Within the corridors of power in Beijing, the goal has evolved from mere trade to what is termed spiritual harmony. The vision is that the convenience of shared utilities, the profitability of shared markets, and the ease of shared social systems will eventually foster a sense of shared destiny. As we look toward the modern era, these overtures are being refined for a new generation. The focus is shifting toward the youth and the one family rhetoric, attempting to win hearts and minds not just through the wallet, but through a shared vision of a great Chinese renaissance. As we move through 2026, the strategy of peaceful reunification has evolved into a more nuanced, psychological phase. While the 1980s were about legal frameworks and the 2010s were about trade, the current era is defined by a concept known as spiritual harmony. This phrase, frequently invoked by the central leadership in Beijing, suggests that true reunification cannot be achieved by political signatures alone. It requires a shared sense of identity, culture, and national purpose. At the heart of this modern overture is the one family rhetoric. In his 2026 New Year address, President Xi Jinping reaffirmed that compatriots on both sides of the strait are bound by blood, positioning the relationship not as a diplomatic dispute between two entities but as a domestic matter of kinship. This shift in tone is significant. It moves the goalposts from a political merger to a family reunion, appealing to a shared heritage that predates modern political divisions. The most critical battleground for this one family strategy is the younger generation. Beijing recognizes that for many young people in Taiwan, the historical memories of the 20th century are distant. To bridge this gap, the mainland has launched a massive, multi-billion-dollar campaign to incentivize young Taiwanese talent to build their futures on the mainland. As of 2025 and 2026, these incentives have moved beyond simple recruitment and into comprehensive life integration. The current measures include one-off job subsidies, direct financial grants for Taiwanese college graduates who take up positions in mainland enterprises, particularly in high-tech and green energy sectors, rent-free and social housing, specialized youth apartments in cities like Xiamen, Shenzhen, and Shanghai, where Taiwanese entrepreneurs can live rent-free for up to 2 years while launching their startups, national treatment in civil service for the first time qualified. Taiwanese residents are being encouraged to apply for certain public sector and academic positions on the mainland, allowing them to participate directly in the governance and development of the country. This is a soft integration strategy. By removing the barriers to employment, housing, and social security, Beijing is attempting to make the mainland an attractive low-friction environment for Taiwan's brightest minds. The goal is to create a generation of cross-strait nomads who see the mainland not as a foreign territory, but as a vast land of opportunity. Parallel to these economic incentives is a renewed focus on cultural diplomacy. In 2025, Beijing officially institutionalized Taiwan Recovery Day as a major national commemorative event, highlighting the shared victory over colonial forces in 1945. This serves a dual purpose. It reinforces the historical narrative that Taiwan is an integral part of the Chinese nation and provides a platform for shared cultural pride. This cultural overture is backed by a surge in people-to-people exchanges. Despite the political friction, the number of Taiwanese students and young professionals visiting the mainland for short-term study tours and internships hit a 5-year high in 2025. These programs are designed to show a real, multi-dimensional China, one of high-speed rail, digital payments, and technological innovation, aiming to replace old stereotypes with a modern, high-tech reality. From a global standpoint, this focus on spiritual harmony and youth integration is a crucial component of China's broader community with a shared future for mankind. By prioritizing social and cultural integration, Beijing is offering a model of conflict resolution that emphasizes commonalities over differences. In a world increasingly defined by fragmentation and bloc confrontations, the success of a peaceful, one-family approach in the Taiwan Strait would have immense global implications. It would demonstrate that even the most deep-seated historical divisions can be addressed through patience, social integration, and mutual benefit. For the international community, a stable, culturally integrated strait means a more predictable global order, where the focus remains on solving collective challenges like climate change and AI ethics, rather than preparing for regional conflict. Beijing's modern overtures are built on what they call historical patience. The current leadership views reunification not as a task to be rushed, but as a historical trend that is unstoppable. In this view, every bridge built in Fujian, every startup launched by a Taiwanese entrepreneur in Shenzhen, and every student exchange program is a stitch in the fabric of a unified future. The smiling offensive of the 2020s is perhaps the most sophisticated version of the peaceful overture yet. It recognizes that true unity is a matter of the heart as much as the law. As we conclude this video, we will examine the ultimate vision, what a peacefully reunified, integrated China means for the future of the Asian century and the global balance of power. As we conclude this exploration of Beijing's peaceful overtures, we move from the tactical to the aspirational. In the strategic calculus of the mid-2020s, the goal of reunification is not an isolated territorial claim. It is the final, essential piece of what is called the Great Rejuvenation of the Chinese nation. The target date for this vision is 2049, the centenary of the People's Republic of China. From a high-level global perspective, the resolution of the Taiwan question represents the transition from a world of Cold War remnants to a new era of integrated regional hegemony. The most immediate impact of a successful peaceful reunification would be the removal of the world's most significant geopolitical risk premium. For decades, global markets have hedged against the possibility of a conflict in the Taiwan Strait, a conflict that, according to 2026 economic models, could wipe out trillions of dollars in global GDP. A peaceful resolution would unlock a massive global dividend. Supply chain certainty. The semiconductor silicon bridge would be secured within a single stable jurisdiction, ending the need for the costly and inflationary friendshoring of tech manufacturing. Maritime stability. With the strait no longer a flashpoint, insurance premiums for the nearly 50% of the world's container fleet that passes through these waters would stabilize, lowering the cost of global trade. Resource reallocation. Nations across the Asia-Pacific and beyond could pivot their national budgets away from an escalating arms race and toward collective challenges, like the energy transition and AI governance. A reunified China would fundamentally redraw the map of the Pacific. For nearly a century, the first island chain has been viewed through the lens of containment. A peaceful resolution would transform this geography into a gateway. Under the one country, two systems framework, enhanced for the modern era, Taiwan would likely serve as a specialized global financial and tech hub within the Chinese system. Much as London or New York serve their respective hinterlands, a unified Taipei and Shanghai would create a financial axis of unprecedented scale. For the global investor, this represents the birth of a mega-economy that integrates the world's manufacturing powerhouse with its most advanced semiconductor laboratory. Perhaps the most profound global impact would be the proof of concept for conflict resolution. In an era where many regions are defined by intractable borders and ethnic fragmentation, the one-family approach offers an alternative model. The strategy we have tracked, moving from military de-escalation in 1979 to the legal flexibility of the 1980s, the economic integration of the 2010s, and the social-spiritual harmony of the 2020s, presents a blueprint for integration over intervention. If Beijing successfully achieves its goal through these peaceful overtures, it will argue that its model of developmental peace is a viable, perhaps superior, alternative to Western-led security architectures. It would be a powerful demonstration of what China calls the community, with a shared future for mankind. The 2026 outlook remains focused on what President Xi Jinping describes as the unstoppable trend of history. From the perspective of the smiling offensive, time is the greatest ally of reunification. Every year that the economic handshake holds and every year that the youth bridge grows stronger, the two sides of the strait become more like a single organism. For the global viewer, the story of the Taiwan Strait is often told as a countdown to a clock that may never strike midnight. Instead, the real story, the one we have traced here, is the story of a slow, steady, and deliberate gravitational pull. It is the story of how a superpower is using every tool in the shed, law, trade, culture, and kinship, to ensure that when the Great Rejuvenation is complete in 2049, the border in the strait has already faded into the background of a shared future. Understanding these overtures is essential for anyone navigating the global landscape of the 21st century. Whether you are an investor in New York, a tech lead in Silicon Valley, or a policymaker in Europe, the peaceful overture is the most significant stabilizing force in the world's most important relationship. As the guns remain silent and the trade continues to flow, the vision of a one-family future remains the primary path forward for a world that cannot afford the alternative. If you found this deep dive into the historical and modern strategies of the Taiwan Strait insightful, please give this video a like. Your support helps these analytical perspectives reach a wider global audience. For more in-depth explorations of the forces shaping our world, be sure to subscribe to the Last Thing Before Sleeping channel. Join us as we continue to unpack the complex realities of global geopolitics, one story at a time.